Let's do it. Welcome everybody. Once again, love, of course, seeing everybody's wonderful faces. Over here this time, we're gonna be introducing ourselves with a lovely, wonderful guest I'm looking forward to learning more about. As everybody, of course, knows, the wonderful Miss Evelyn, or Mimi, as always. I guess she's the master networker. But today we're gonna have a young people will get a chance to learn about voting registration. As I know for today myself, I need to go vote in comparison to tomorrow. And I look forward to just hearing from our guests today. So I'll delegate that over back to Miss Evelyn.
Thank you, Paul. One of the things that we will ask you guys to do, if you would, like I say, remain muted, and please do not share your personal information in the chat as far as your businesses and things like that. So to get started, we are the Anti-Racist.Jubilee.Symposia. And I'm one of the organizers. My name is Evelyn, and so is Paul, who's one of the we organized a couple of years ago. And 3 of our members are not here today, but we're glad you guys are here. Fantastic. So we're going to get started. You know, we're in the middle of the GOTV season, right? It's right up on us, and voter registrations are taking place in every state in the nation. And the same question, basically, uninterrupted. The questions are dominating and most of the conversations, and they are, how can we get more young people registered? What can we do to motivate young people to show up to the polls and vote once they're registered? Today, we have a panel of young activists, young voters, who will respond to that question, but will probably take us on a reality check about young people and the vote. And they might even break down those assumptions. We'll just have to wait and see. Our key question for today during this important interview discussion forum is this: is the electoral voting system, the registration process, really set up for young voters to actively participate? And if so, how? And if not, why not? So with that, it is my honor at this time to introduce the people that will be asking the question facilitators. And they are Carmen Vela, my friend for years now, from Texas, my home state, gotta say that. So, and then Paul Jackson, who lives in Florida, one of the organizers for this event and this group. And along with myself, we will be the question facilitators today. And I would like for Carmen to just give a brief introduction of herself, your name, state, profession, anything else you want to say, and Paul, you would do the same. So take it away, Carmen. You're muted, sweetie.
Hi, yes. Hi, Carmen Vela. I'm a retired school teacher from Texas, and I've been with Move On since 2018, and I've known Evelyn since then. And I'm gonna be a grandmother again, and she's having a boy. That's the sex of the baby. And then, and I've tried to stay engaged in politics as much as possible, but I've been doing a lot of immigration work, so nice to meet you.
Awesome, thank you.
Alrighty, and I'm Paul Jackson II. Not at Miss Carmen's level yet, but I am a 3rd-year teacher where I teach algebra and geometry here in Miami, Florida. Let's see, been a part of our organization, but also assisted with Move On whenever needed. 2 years now? Yeah, always engaged whatever policy, fellowships. If you're most familiar with like Teach for America, I'm a fellow from Teach for America as well. So I'm excited for today's opportunity as we're about policy and our laws in play to help change our future, which all starts with our right to vote. So here we are.
That's right. Thank you both. Well, I'm Evelyn, and like Carmen, I am a retired educator from Texas. So it's really good to see all of you guys here, and you will get a chance, if you don't mind, to introduce yourselves in the chat and just say where you're from, what state you're representing. That would be awesome. And while you're doing that, I'm going to introduce our panel for today. It is with beyond pleasure that I have the opportunity to introduce these young people. I have the privilege of working with them not working with, joining them every Tuesday and Thursday, I think for the last 3 weeks now, in Move On's weekly phone banking. And it's amazing. It's amazing how I see that they are such leaders and passionate about the work, but not only passionate, they know what's going on. You know, and I really like the way they interact with us, those who are there, and how they share their informational training with those who don't know really what's going on. And the patience is what I really appreciate too, and the wisdom. So it is my pleasure at this time to introduce Katie Waters. She'll tell you a little bit more about herself in a few minutes. Ricky Longoria from Texas, and Joe Noctigal. So we'll start with you, Katie. Tell us a bit about who Katie is.
Hi, my name is Katie. I am from Stockbridge, Georgia. I'm an electoral fellow for Move On for the midterm elections. I'm a mom to 2 young boys, and I am just really, I've been kind of involved with politics in general when I voted in my first election, which was in 2008 during the Barack Obama election. And I got really, really pumped about it. And I've kind of just been interested in working my way through it since then. So.
Okay, Joe, why don't you go next?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Joe Nodigal. I'm located in Madison, Wisconsin. I use any and all pronouns. I was also a teacher before I made a shift to career activism. And so I started specifically first with queer advocacy and helping with youth specifically. I worked for a nonprofit called G-Safe. And then things took a bit of a turn and I joined Move On's team as an electoral fellow this year. And I'm excited to talk today.
All righty. Thank you, Joe. Ricky.
Hi, everyone. First, I want to thank Ms. Evelyn and the entire Anti-Racist.Jubilee team for hosting us today. My name is Ricky Longoria. My pronouns are he and him. I'm also from Texas, so good to see a few Texans in here. And I'm also a former public school employee. I've been in politics, involved in politics since the 4th grade during Obama when he was running. So I'm excited to be here and spark the change we need.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Well, let me just kind of let the audience know how this is going to work, okay? First of all, Carmen Avila is going to interview the fellows until about 12:35. And after that, we'll take questions from the audience for the fellows for about 10 minutes. So that's the first part of it. So Carmen, if you're ready, let's get it started.
Okay. So according to an article written by an interest group in Vermont, the following information was shared. Voter turnout is notoriously low among young people. However, the dominant narrative that young folks don't vote because they are simply apathetic is largely inaccurate. Often the primary barriers preventing young voters from voting are structural, not personal. So my first question is, what are some of those barriers that might keep young people away from the polls? And Ricky, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, that's such a really great question. Being from Texas, there's a large group of widely underrepresented youth, and some barriers that might, affect that is the lack of transportation and the lack of education, especially here in Texas, where they have a whole bunch of voting restrictions where you can't vote by mail. That's a barrier. And there's some youth who are going to college and they don't really have the education to know, oh, hey, before I go to college, I need to go get registered at my county clerk's office. There's no really push for that in the state of Texas. I just think that's because a lot of the GOP legislators here are scared, and they know that if the youth are involved, it can really make or break their election for them.
Thank you. Katie, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I also agree with what Ricky said as far as the transportation. Also, another thing is I think it's not something that is spoken about in our education system, I feel like too, and for kids to be, in the public school system, especially when they turn 18, knowing that it's the first time that they can vote, it's not explained. So unless you have family members and friends that are very active in, the voting process. I feel like young people just don't really understand the whole process of, oh, I need to go and register, because they're not really, it's not discussed in schools, and it should be something that I think has changed with, other things that are in our education system.
Okay, and I'm sorry, my old brain fails me. The last young man.
Joe.
Joe, yeah. I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
Hi, Joe.
And so I'd say with a lot of these things, when you talk about like, what are these barriers for youth like coming to the voting polls, we're talking about a lot of systemic things, that these are just barriers to a lot of people, period. And honestly, the youth today just do not care enough to go through those barriers. I think that's a really big thing. And I think when we're talking about our current like government, a lot of these people who are in office aren't relatable to young people because they're not young people. And so because of that, they are so late to the game to figure out how to communicate with young people. So like when we talk about these young people, right now, you would be wanting to advertise how to register to vote on TikTok. And that's something that a lot of people in government haven't even heard of. And so it's just like, when we talk about like, why is this like why is this minority like not showing up? It's because they don't have accurate representation in the government itself.
Thank you. My second question is, how easy or not is the voter registration process for young people maybe in each of your states? Because I know each state has different processes. You want to start with that, Joe?
Yeah, I can start with that. So Wisconsin specifically, once you are registered to vote in person by like bringing identification, it's actually pretty easy just to renew it every single election period. And I'm like somebody who my parents divorced growing up, so I moved 14 times before I went to college, and then throughout college had a lot of address changes, and then I recently moved to Madison, and I've moved twice since in the city, and it's just like, it's been pretty consistent just being able to like look it up online and then like change it online, which has been really nice.
Okay. Katie, how about your state?
Yeah, it's pretty here in Georgia. It's pretty simple. Where like you can just go online and go to Vote 411, I think is what it is, and you can register to vote. And that's actually how I did it. And it's the same with what Joe said. Like they do, you'll get stuff in the mail, or you'll sometimes get emails or text messages that remind you to update it if it needs to be updated for specifically where you have moved to. So I think that it's, simple, but I think it's also one of the things, once again, where if they're not told that this is something you need to do, like, no, they're not going to know to register to vote unless somebody is guiding them in that general direction. So I just think speaking more about it would make it an easier process for them.
Thank you. And Ricky.
Yeah, so being from Texas, I would have to say it's pretty hard registering to vote. One, because of so many laws that we have. You can register online, but once you register online, you have to print that form, put it in an envelope, get a stamp, and send it to the Secretary of State or to your elections clerk office. Like I said, many youth don't have access to transportation, so having that is a big barrier. How are you going to register to vote if you can't even drive to register to vote or even vote in the first place? And also the ID requirements are pretty hard. In order to get a voter ID, you have to have a specific number that's on your driver's license. And again, some people don't have driver's license. So there's just so many barriers that are restricting people to vote.
Thank you. And the last question, do you believe that young people are apathetic toward voting? Why or why not? Ricky, you want to start with that?
Well, I think that there's a lot of youth that are, very empathetic, and they actually do care about the causes, but there's this stigma around them that they don't care. So I guess that's kind of putting them off the edge, like, oh, they're already telling me that, I better follow through and just make it seem like I don't care. And there's not much of a push to encourage them to go out to vote as well. Whereas being at their level, coming to speak with us, go talk to college students, have a forum with them, learn from them. What can we do to educate and, get them more involved?
Thank you. Katie?
Yeah, I feel like young people today really don't have an interest in registering to vote and even getting out and voting, because a lot of them do think that their vote doesn't count. So they a lot of young people I've spoken to have said there's no reason to vote because it doesn't matter if I vote. It's all up to, you know, the Electoral College essentially. And it's they don't have a lot of desire that their voices are truly being heard. So even though it's being pushed, like your voice, your voice, your vote, like get out and vote, young people don't feel like that's the truth. So I don't think they have a drive to get out and do it.
Thank you. And Joe, I think you kind of expressed that kind of the same thing. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely echoing what Katie said, specifically just because like, and it's unfortunate, like I wasn't a really like active voter until my rights were questioned, you know, like until like I had to actually actively start fighting for my own rights as a trans person. And so like a lot of these people who grew up in a just very privileged area in America, like a very privileged time in America, like they don't understand what it's like to like actually work for things sometimes. But also it's just that, yeah, they are apathetic because I think this generation specifically coming up has to be apathetic because of everything that they've gone through.
Evelyn, so the next step is for people to ask questions.
Yes, I will read the introduction, and then if you can ask the questions. So much of the voting is intertwined with very important issues. And according to the Annie E. Casey Foundation, 7 issues have commanded the attention of Generation Z or Gen Z so far. And those are healthcare, mental health, higher education, economic security, civic engagement, race, equity, and the environment. So the first question would be, as a young person, how important are these issues to you when you are voting, or maybe even to your friends when they're voting? The social climate, the healthcare, mental health issues, hunger, inequality, I'm adding a few more, housing, education, student debt, human rights, civil, the climate, and all of that. How important are those to you? Let's start with Katie. And then if you can take up the next 2, Carmen, that would be awesome.
Yes.
Personally, so many of those issues that you just pointed out are very important to me when it comes to voting. You know, with education, especially having 2 young kids in the public school system, I have to be very aware with what's happening as far as who is running in our specific county. Student debt is another thing. Like I am, you know, like many people in this country, I have a pretty substantial amount of student debt from when I was in college. And knowing that there are candidates that support, you know, getting rid of student debt is very important to me. There are so many things that, like housing issues, social justice, things that I think about whenever it comes to me voting personally, that I take when I go to the polls. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Joe?
I'm so sorry. I was typing out that comment for the chat. Could you just repeat the question for me?
As a young person, how important are these issues to you when voting in terms of the social climate of our nation? And some examples are healthcare, mental health, hunger, inequality in housing, education, student debt, human rights, racial equality, climate, economy, economic security.
Right. It's so interesting for people to say like these specific issues when it's just like these are just like facets of being a human being. And it's just like these are just like basic rights that anybody should have no matter where they are. I mean, specifically with like talking about mental health, because like the mental health stigma, specifically in a capitalistic society, is just like, no, you have to work. You can't take time for yourself. You can't take the time you need. And like I could talk for hours on queer advocacy subjects that like Republicans have been like gearing towards us since 2015 and Obergefell v. Hodges, because they were so upset that it happened. And so like that's when they like really targeted like, oh, well, like what subjects make people uncomfortable? Oh, bathrooms and sports. That's how all of that started. So it's really important. I mean, my older sister is $70K in college, just like debt, from student debt. And so like when we talk about like people, especially like, I don't think I know a single person my age that if student loan repayments continue, like they resume, they will not be able to afford rent. Like it is a big deal. And especially like when we look at every other first world country in the world, we're so behind.
Right. Thank you for that. It was beautiful. It's just human rights. Okay, I'm sorry, Evelyn. I know we're not supposed to comment. And Ricky.
Yeah, so Carmen, every single issue that you mentioned there is highly important to me in voting when voting. But I want to talk about mental health and higher education and access to higher education. I'm a senior at Texas A&M University in Corpus Christi, and I'm a part of the TRIO McNair Scholars Program. And what this program does is it prepares underrepresented groups to achieve and obtain a degree in in a PhD or a master's degree. And we were at a conference, and I was talking to some people who I was just mingling with and talking about voting. And they were telling me that they had voted Republican and voted for Donald Trump. And I was so, shocked and appalled at that, because when Donald Trump was in office, he cut so many funds towards the McNair Scholars Program, and those funds to access to higher education. And I was telling him, how could you vote against someone who's, why are you voting against your own interest? But again, it's that lack of education there that is not being told to us, and why it's important. And also being from Texas, mental health, we ranked last with access to mental health care. And what happened in Uvalde, it shows why we need, these resources to take care of ourselves. And the governor and every other single Republican says it's a mental health issue, but why are they cutting so much funds to fund that? It's absolutely appalling, and every single person needs to know about these issues.
Exactly. Katie?
Is this still the question on the issues of voting? Oh, okay. I did answer it, but I'll answer. There was one more point.
Sorry.
No. But I'm glad you called on me, because there was one more point. Reproductive rights are another thing that I really, being a woman especially, it's something that is very important to me when it comes to voting. Making sure that there are candidates that support, reproductive rights for people in this country.
Yes, for all people. Number two, the next question is, do you see politics and the voting process as a means for resolving those issues, or is there another way? And we can start with you, Katie.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I'm sorry.
Do you see politics and the voting process as a means for resolving those issues, or is there another way?
I think politics and the voting process could definitely be a way to solve some of those issues, as long as the candidates who are running actually stick to their agendas and their platforms that they are running with. Because there have been so many times when you have candidates that are constantly saying they're going to do this and this and this and this if you vote for them, and then as soon as they get into office, they may accomplish one, maybe two, maybe not even any of it. So any other way, I'm not sure if there would be another way to resolve some of these issues, other than everybody within a community coming together and, fighting like hell to kind of make those issues better than what they are right now.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, we are set up in a government that's the only way we can see effective change, unfortunately. And when we think of like what other ways are set up to address these things, and we saw it in 2020, right? We saw people revolt, we saw people go crazy, and that's just because when you fight against a class so hard for so long, they are bound to snap and tear down what they built for you, right? And so when we talk about voting, that's why it is so important, because it's the only way to try to get effective change.
Thank you. Let's see. The last question is, what issues are you most passionate about, and who or what motivated you to become an active, informed participant in our system of democracy? And Ricky, that's for you. And if you want to also weigh in on the previous question.
Yeah, I'll answer the first one. So I agree with Joe, our government is the only way we can see change by voting. But again, we need to reach out to our youth voters and educate them on these issues so they can be inspired and encouraged to vote and try to make that change. And as for the second question, there are a lot of issues that have inspired me to become an activist. But right now in this political moment, I am focused on, ending gun violence. I live 2 hours from Uvalde, and I can feel the pain that the community is feeling. I went down there about 5 days after the horrific massacre. And when you're driving in there, you just feel the sorrow that this community is feeling.
Mhm.
And the way they've been treated by the current governor and the Texas GOP is just so heartbreaking. Their children were 10 and 9 years old and they were obliterated, closed caskets. They didn't even get to see. They needed 2 strong people to go in to view them to see if they could have an open casket funeral. And the majority of them couldn't. And that's, what it's inspiring me to vote and encouraging others to vote for the 19 children and 2 teachers in Uvalde.
Great. Well, I was born in Uvalde and I live also an hour and a half away. So I feel you. Okay. So on the last question, Katie, what issues are you most passionate about?
Well, like I said before, reproductive rights is something that I'm very passionate about. And then Bob's comment on the chat about climate change. That is something that I am also very, very passionate about. Just having 2 young children and knowing that if things don't change within trying to fix the climate change issue, which we're already almost past the point of no return in that, they will have no future. And that's really, really scary to think about when we could do so much to try and fix it. And for so many years, people have just been saying, no, it's not that important. No, we're not going to spend the money on it. And now we're literally at that point where we either do it now or who knows what's going to happen in 50 years. So those are the issues that I am very, very passionate about at the moment.
Thank you. Ricky? No, Joe. I'm sorry. Joe?
All good. Yeah, so I actually got really into career activism when I started as a teacher and I saw how badly my own community was being treated in 2020. I was like, I graduated high school in 2015 and this is still happening? Really?
Yeah.
And so that's how I really got into it, is just seeing the young queer community. This last year, 1 in 5 transgender youth attempted suicide.
Yeah.
It's insane. And I saw that firsthand in my classrooms. I would get the email saying so-and-so is coming back from the mental hospital today. Make sure that you make a very warm welcome back, all these different things. And so I just couldn't take that, because as a kid, I just suffered through all of those things in silence. And so I'm just I could never allow somebody to do that again. I think specifically then I, with my own personal diagnosis of PTSD back in January, and then really seeing no, people don't know how to interact with people with disability, really opened my eyes to the lack of just information. And I mean, we have the disability system is set up in a way that could work, right? But the way that how much goes into the process of actually trying to receive those benefits. You have to I have to have a diagnosis from a social worker, my home my home doctor. I have to go to a psychiatric appointment, and then I have to meet so on this criteria, and I have to mail it in, email it, pay this. It's just it's insane. It's so crazy, just all the processes that we have to do to just be basic human beings, right? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Evelyn?
Yeah,
Or
thank
Paul?
you, Carmen. Yeah, and panelists too. We're going to transition a bit, and we have about 10 minutes to entertain questions from the audience. And please make sure you're asking a question and not a commentary, just a question, okay? So if you have a question, are there questions in the chat already?
I think Bob had a question in the chat. I'm not seeing any other ones.
Okay. Yeah. So he says, do young people care about climate change? I think you guys have already answered that, but if you want to go into more detail about it, that would be awesome. Joe, you
I
want
can
to
go
start?
into a little bit more detail. Young people do care about climate change. I think specifically millennials really care about climate change. I think that a lot of Gen Z people don't care about climate change because they think that we are already past the point of no return. I think that's a big reason why they don't care about voting, is because we're just waiting for our society to collapse at this point. And I mean, like, it's great. Like, I think most people my age are looking forward to the next housing crash. Is like, that's the point we're at right now.
Okay, Katie, you have a smile on your face. You want to respond to that question? Maybe Joe's comment too?
Well, yeah, it was the housing crash thing, because that, happened when, in 2008? Is that when it? I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's insane. I can tell you, my oldest is 11 years old, and we have open discussions in our house. We're very, very real with our children. We're not like scaring them, but my oldest understands what's happening when it comes to the world and the climate. And he's very passionate already in himself and trying to help out and fix that, and whatever he can do. So it may not be, I feel like there are certain people in the Gen Z, like you have Greta Thunberg, who, a huge activist for climate change. But I do think that, yes, there is a big majority of young people who they just don't care, because nobody else is caring for them. So why would they care about it? You have the older generations who are basically saying, oh, well, like, we're not going to be around to see it, so why does it matter? And that's not encouraging to them. So I feel like they do have a hard time trying to be passionate about that.
Ricky, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I'm from Texas, Corpus Christi, and I go to school by the water. So we're on an island, and there are a lot of activist groups who are advocating and speaking up on climate change, and they're addressing it with city and the county commissioners and the county judge, and they're taking them very seriously, and they're addressing to the citizens of Corpus Christi and all of South Texas, really, how important climate change is in taking care of our environment and our coastal waters. And through these activist groups, we're seeing many fishermen, many people who actually care about it. So I think that they do care, but I guess it's probably because of the region I'm in. But like Greta Thunberg on a national level. So I guess it's just talking about it more and educating the youth as to why they should care about it, to live in an environment that's safe for them, their future children, and their grandchildren.
Okay, thank you guys for that. I think I saw Maya's a question first in the chat, and then I see 3 hands up. And her question is, where do older politicians fall into reaching out to young people? And then she said, or rather, how do they fail? How do they fail? Messaging, platform, political focus. What do you guys think?
I can go ahead and answer this question. So I'm a communication major, and I focus a lot on political communication as well. I think that they are failing at reaching out to the youth voters. They need to reach us where we are, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, things like that. And I think that, that their staffers can make, simple graphics and compare the 2 different candidates they're running against, as to, weighing the pros and the cons for the Democratic candidate rather than the extreme right candidate. It will help the young voters, see that, oh, okay, they're, obviously not for me, and they are for me. It's going to encourage them to vote, but it's, again, reaching them at their level. And, there's so many politicians who are great at, hosting town halls, but they're more focused on, the older generation. Why not have a town hall, or, for college students, for the youth, get them involved and hear what they have to say, have it at a college, university, get in a local Democratic club for youth voters, or an LGBT club, and hear them out, reach out to them.
Fantastic response. Okay, Jeff, your hand is up.
Hi, yeah, so I've been active, as I mentioned in the chat, with Move On and Indivisible, and attending all kinds of other webinars. And lately I ran across an organization called the Civic Center, and they're doing all kinds of programs for, mostly aimed at high schools. They provide supplies and stuff to help get high school students registered to vote. Like, I wound up calling like 25 schools to try to get them to start programs there to encourage the graduating seniors around graduation time to vote. Are you guys aware of those kind of programs? And also, one other thing is, I've been there's a phenomenon known as social proof. You probably have heard of it, where if you see other people doing something, you're more likely to do it. So, I've been saying to people, well, why not have buttons that say, I registered to vote, I'm using my voice, or I registered to vote, Black Lives Matter, or, whatever the things you're engaged with. Anybody doing that sort of thing? Do you think that those approaches, the resources from the Civic Center or doing buttons or things like that would help?
Joe, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take it. I think that yes, yes, all of those things would help. And I think that also just like incentivizes people to go and like do these things to have like the fun swag that they can have. An example I can use in my community is RuPaul's Drag Race. At the end of every episode, somebody comes out with a sign that says register to vote. And like it's just like a normal thing that's part of the structure of the show now. And like I know that that's just that alone, just like having that within the community is so much. So like, why aren't we like having things to register to vote at the Super Bowl? Why aren't we having things to register to vote at like Packer games or basketball games? Any of these things throughout the year? There's so many different things that like the government can just straight up be like, hey, you're putting this there. And they have to say yes. And it's just like, it's almost like you don't want people to vote. Like
Katie?
Yeah, I think if high schoolers, especially like the junior, senior year, if they had more, I don't know, they took a day maybe out of the semester to get more information on registering to vote. And, because 18 is when you can vote for the first time. So if it's not there and it's not flashing in front of their faces, unfortunately, especially in the society that we live in now, everything is so fast paced. People constantly have a screen in front of their face. Like, put it out there in a way that young people can actually see it. They would probably do it more. And yes, the swag of like the pin, I would have loved that when I had registered to vote when I was 18. Like, I think all I got was my little voter registration card, which was still great and it was cool, but add in some extra little stickers or swag or even a t-shirt, like it'd be great to wear, like first time voting. I don't know. That's just my thoughts.
Ricky?
Yeah, yes to everything that everyone's been saying, especially with Katie, having that swag is going to encourage people to go. I mean, who does not like a free t-shirt? And when, they're going to be proud of, and to wear it as soon as they're done registering. And once someone else sees that, they're going to say, oh, how can I get that? How can I get that? Oh, go register. I'll take you right now. I'll show you how. And it's going to, have like an effect. It's going to triple. Everyone's, going to be registered. We're going to have high voter turnouts. We're going to reach the people where they're at, and we're going to make change.
Thank you guys for that. We have time for one more response in this particular segment, and then we'll start again with the panel discussion. So let's go to Charlotte now.
I have a couple of things. One thing, one of the people on the panel did make a very good issue when he said the good and the bad. The Republicans' issues that's not helping the public citizens, and the Democrat issues that are. But I've always run across when you do phone banking to try to get people to vote. They say, "Well, I don't believe in politics, and I'm not going to vote." Well, there has to be. I think the Democrats need to be more vocal. They're not vocal enough to let them know that the Republicans are taking away their educational rights. They're cutting education. They want to cut this and this. They need to come public and say the things that what they actually stand for. The Republicans are on TV all the time saying what they don't want and what they do support, and what is it? Our QAnon and Christian nationalists. We need to have our Democrats be more vocal and tell people what they stand for. A long time ago, there used to be.
Charlotte, do you have a question for the?
Yeah, I'm asking. These are kind of questions. Is how do you, in other words, how do you get the people to say I don't want to talk politics when the government is politics? So that was that question in that.
Okay, we're gonna leave it to. We're gonna have just one question because we're right on time. So your first question is, if you could ask it again, please.
Okay. How do you get, it used to be on college campuses, this candidates or elected officials will actually come to the campus and talk about what they stood for, or what their policies are, what they want and what they don't want. Do they do this now? Is there anybody in college that can answer that question? Are there any elected officials coming to your campuses telling you what the Democratic Party stands for, or what the Republicans stand
Okay,
for?
Ricky, you want to take that question, please?
Yeah, so there's not very few that do that, but there is one candidate. When he was running, he was always present on the college campus. I guess he's pretty young too. He's in his 30s, and his name is Eric Holguin. And he was always actively registering voters on the campus and trying to get them to turn out the vote and helping them in any way he can. But other than him, there hasn't been a large presence from politicians.
So maybe that's something you guys can work on to change that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I'm through. I have more, but that's okay.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Joe, what are you thinking?
I didn't have any political candidates visit me when I was in college. No.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for that interaction. We're going to move on to the next segment now with Paul. You ready, Paul? Okay, he's connected.
There we go. Okay, that was weird.
Yeah,
I don't know what
got it.
I was like, what? Why is everybody silent? Okay. Apologies. What you going to ask another question, Simon Zevlin? Because I could go in.
Yeah, you're at the 12:45 hour.
Perfect. Okay. Yes. Things that I was able to gather and write down. I'll be curious to hear from our panelists' perspectives. If you come across a voter or someone who may be, I'm not gonna say challenging, but someone who have disconnected from politics, where they may press, or not really say disconnected, but find from an analysis standpoint to say how someone could possibly be voting against their own interests if that's being projected to them, rather than someone necessarily elaborating to them to express their own interest for a possible votee or a representative who are coming in for service, where it might be their own interest that they're elaborating for a voter to find themselves interested in. So for the example that was shared was how, let's say in college, for someone to explain how they may have voted for Trump, even though they're a part of Trio. However, what if they found themselves for the Trio experience they're part of wasn't as best helpful for themselves? Whereas like, you know what, I might be interested in this here where Trump may have some benefits that I agree with in comparison to say, yeah, I can take away funding from here because my experience with Trio wasn't the best. How would you all, I guess, go through that conversation or dialogue or similar stories like that?
Well, Paul, that's a great question. As I mentioned, I'm a comm major. I'm very vocal, and I can ask any question that I feel that needs to be asked. So, like I was talking with that individual from my conference, she was from another school, and I simply asked her, why would you vote for him? And she goes, oh, well, he has a lot of beliefs that I align with. And I said, okay, did you grow up in the public school system? She goes, yes. And I was like, okay, did your school offer you free lunch to children who couldn't afford it? And she goes, yes, I got free lunch. And I said, okay, that right there proves as to why you should not be voting for Donald Trump or for any Republican, because they're against all that and taking away any and all funds to public schools. And they want to privatize every single one of them. And, we went into depth, more, and I asked her if she was insured, and she said no. And I said, why do you think you're not insured? And she goes, well, I didn't really see a reason as to why I should be insured, or, why there's a reason why I'm not. And I said, well, that's a big issue and why you should vote too, because Republicans don't want everyone to have insurance. They want everyone to have private insurance, which is obviously is not affordable in your situation. You're a college student, you're in the McNair Scholars Program. You know, you need to educate yourself on these issues because, you know, you're voting against your own interest.
Katie or Joe?
Yeah, really just snaps to everything Ricky said. I think it's very easy to be an apathetic voter until it affects you or somebody you know, right? And I mean, like a lot of these things people just straight up don't take stances on because it doesn't apply to them. But when you really recognize like, no, all of this applies to you and it's all based off of these events.
Yeah, it's very real. Of course, thinking myself being in the classroom and coming to election season once again. Another, I guess, challenging point or just perspective I would love from you all interest is to gather from, let's say, someone who might be interested into sharing. I hear a lot of negatives in returns to someone who might be a Republican. But also, why is there such a strong divide in general between Democrats and Republicans if either party or actually both parties have contributed to the downfall of one's community or the race of people? How would you all necessarily go about breaking down conversations to that? Or if maybe one's discussion is how can I navigate to find policy that someone who could be Democrat, Republican, Independent, contrarian, etc. Just different levels of how one might identify themselves, where they want to necessarily have policies that represent themselves rather than the norm of we just see in two-party systems that can, I guess, is the majority dominant.
I can start this one. There's a website that has just a pretty thorough, just like a fun quiz that tells you like, all right, based on your like answers, here are where like your party lines would be. Like you're this much this much this, and specifically like here are the people in your area that you should vote for that deal with your like alignments. Almost every single person that I've had take that quiz has like, they have flipped because they're like, oh, I was just raised red. And so like, I just always thought like, that's what I was told to always vote. And so now when they actually like can look at like the views of the people they're voting for, then they're like, oh, wow, wait, my parents voted for them, you know? I think that just like education of just like basic things like that would be so helpful.
Yeah, I agree with what Joe said. And having the internet is such a vast thing for people to be able to look up candidates and, you know, educate themselves more, where some people say, you know, I've talked to people who say, well, this candidate is Republican and they align with my views, but then I'm also voting for this candidate who is Democrat. And it's so like, it's not always going to be the same. And yeah, when you're raised a certain way to be told to vote a certain way, I have had friends that are just like Joe was saying, like, who were raised Republican and then they're adults, they're now realizing that those same views, I mean, I have family members who from 2016, I did not realize that our views did not align fully. And it's shocking and surprising to see that, especially when some of these people are on, you know, government funding, voting for people who want to strip that away. It's surprising because they don't seem to think that the way that they live their life is something that these people that they support and vote for, these people don't care about them at the end of the day. And that's the sad reality of it.
Thank you, guys. We have, Paul's probably not finished, but just for the remainder of the next section of questions from the audience, please place your questions in the chat. We'll recognize them from the chat. Thank you. Go on, Paul.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I want to, I guess, speak more to what Katie was sharing is, I think that's always the saddest part for me, where politics can really get in the way of family. Where granted, yes, certain opinions can push people away. But I also find it, as we're looking at it within a system, some people will just operate in a sense of what choices are in front of them, where it's like, okay, I just got to make a choice. And whatever that end result could be, of course, push people in a different direction, where what I would love to see, or even just raise and propose, as this is something that I kind of just observed in the sense of just how COVID was handled. When we look at politicians or leaders, and who could be elected leaders or officials, in what ways can we see, or what might be the actual behind the scenes conversations that the public doesn't, or is not aware of, where somebody might want to say, can we have somebody who just be real for us for a moment? Where you might have a leader that's just simply just repeating simple talking points, where you can find someone who could be Democratic identified, and a lot of the speech or language is the same across the board for those who might be Democrat, and vice versa for someone who might be Republican, who speaks, where they all speak the same language in a sense. But what would that take, or how could someone possibly step outside of that box, where it could be a leader, where you actually are speaking in a sense of who you service? How might that observation, or what might be looked upon, or just curious insights of how might one may speak and that be damaging to the party that might fund or represent themselves? How might those conversations look like if we're all just thinking and just getting a chance to say, like, oh wow, like finally somebody's being different? I think that was how some people may have looked at Trump, in a case where he wasn't necessarily a politician in his whole life, where that garnered people's interest to see how you can have somebody be different in the grand scheme of things, where that might be a shift. But I don't want to keep rambling, but basically just wanted to see everybody's perspectives from what was shared and how this might be discussed.
So I think a simple conversation can go a long way. There are a lot of things that Democrats, Republicans, and Independents agree on, much more than we think. And what Beto O'Rourke is doing is, simply fantastic. He's traveling to every county in the state of Texas, regardless if it's a Republican county or a Democratic county or a county that doesn't even vote. And he's talking to voters, and he's, educating them on the issues that matter most to them. He's hearing their questions, and he's responding to their questions as best he can. And they're realizing, oh, okay, Beto, you're making a lot of sense. And in the end, he's actually persuading them to come, or they could still be a Republican, and they're voting Democratic because of the issues that matter most to them, especially around gun violence. We have a governor who claims to be pro-life, and a lot of people are pro-life in Texas, but being pro-life essentially means, trying to restrict gun, have a gun control, trying to save lives, children in classrooms. So again, a simple conversation like that can go a long way, and just hearing people out and listen to them with their concerns they have. Now, obviously, there's a lot of Republicans and a lot of Democrats who are too extreme to even, have that conversation, but a conversation can go a long way.
I think also on the opposite end of what Paul was saying about how Trump looked like, a candidate who was totally different than all the others because he wasn't a politician. You could also say on the opposite end of that, Bernie Sanders was a politician who was really speaking to a lot of people, and he wasn't sugarcoating things for people. And I think to the young voters, especially when he ran in 2016 and in 2020 again, I think he had a big following because he was very open and truthful with a lot of the issues and the things that the young people wanted, and that other people in this country wanted to achieve. He was the one that brought up the whole getting rid of student debt, and all the other politicians followed suit since, but it still is an issue. He's all for universal health care. It's just, those are things that need to be talked about. And that I think those would be important conversations if we had a politician who would stop just trying to give the false promises and just, here's what really needs to happen. And that would probably be good for the young voters.
Thank you guys for that. Thank you, Paul. We're going to take one question from the chat, and then we'll move on to the closing because we're pretty close to time. And this question is from Donna Miller. And she says, what is the age group you consider covering the youth voter. And my second question is, she says, I teach, when I reach out to youth voters on a phone bank or a text bank, how would I word the introduction to a script?
I would consider young voters probably anybody younger than 32-ish. But specifically, I would think like people in their 20s and like people like who are new to the voting scene, I would consider young voters. And personally, when it comes to calling people for the phone banks, I think just like immediately telling you who you are, who you're calling from. But then specifically with text, including your name and just straight up saying like, this isn't an automated like text line, this is a real person, because a lot of people just won't respond because they think it's just an automated text line.
Hi, Donna. Thanks for the question. I think the age group that covers the youth vote would probably be people in their 30s, maybe even early 40s. And then phone banking and text bank, with the script, like Joe said, make the script at a level of the voter. Don't bore them with these words, and don't bore them with such a long script. Get to the point, say how you're doing. Is this a good time to talk? And then say who you are and why you're calling in. That's going to, spark their interest, knowing that you're not asking for money and knowing that you're not going to steal their identity or whatever. So things like that can go a long way.
Thank you guys for that. We're going to move on now to the last part of our forum. And I would like to share with you a quote by the late Congressman John Lewis. You guys have heard this before. He says, the vote is precious. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in a democratic society, and we must use it. So to the three panelists, what does that statement really mean to you as you can continue your journey as a young voter and you're interacting with people that you know are disenfranchised or maybe not even registered? Let's start with Katie.
So one, I love John Lewis. I've read 2 of his books, and that quote is an awesome quote. It is, the vote is the most powerful tool that we have. And so as much as it seems like you getting out and voting doesn't count, it does. And if you don't get out and vote, you're just allowing more of the negative and bad to continue to happen. So it's just very, very important to continue to get out and vote and continue to remind as many people as you can, because in order for change to happen, that's the way it will happen, by getting out and voting for the right candidates and the right policies.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Evelyn. So my very first semester in college, I had a professor who got like really serious, and this was really the first time that I had somebody say like, hey, you need to vote. And he said like, hey, just so you know, the election's coming up this Friday. If you do not vote in this election, in my eyes, you forfeit all rights to complain. He said, if you do not vote, you don't get to complain. If you vote, feel free to complain. If you vote and things aren't the way that you want them, that's fine. But if you don't do the one thing that we are guaranteed as citizens to try to make this place a better place, you don't deserve the right to complain.
Okay.
That's so true, Joe. So I love John Lewis too. And a vote is super powerful, and I want to tell you why. So there's many people who I've talked to and say, "Oh, Ricky, well, my vote doesn't count," and I rebut and I say, "No, that's not true. A simple vote can make or break an election." And I always, I'm using this, example now because in my district we had a congressional race, and a candidate that I was working for won by 30 votes. A simple 30 votes got her to victory. And that if those 30 people had not voted, she would not have won. And things would have gone in the opposite direction. So that is the way and how I'm encouraging others to vote, and why their vote counts, and telling them it does count and why they should vote.
Katie, you want to comment on that? You already did. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for this. And Maya, I noticed that you have been putting things in the chat. And if you would do this for me in just a minute, I have a few sites I would like for people to really focus on as far as helping to get out the young people's vote, the youth vote. But before I do that, I was fortunate enough to attend NetRoots Nation virtually the last 3 days, and it was probably one of the most impacting events I've attended in a long time. But the person that really impressed me was a young lady from Texas, and you guys might know her, Joe and Carmen. Her name is Stephanie Gomez. If you're not familiar with Stephanie Gomez, you need to get to know her. Her organization is Move Texas, and the focus is on reaching out to young people. So Mike, if you could put that into the chat, movetexas.org. Because we've got to be more strategic about educating ourselves first. And it's pretty obvious today that we've asked a lot of great questions, had a lot of fantastic answers. But if we don't have the resources to share with each other, we've just had a conversation today. We've got to go beyond the conversation today. So I want to give you the resources. And these are just a few of the ones that are online. And these sites that I'm going to provide for you, they track you through every step of the voter registration process. And like I believe Katie said earlier, you get a reminder of the elections that are coming up and your polling locations also. So these are very strategic. It's not difficult. We just got to have the conversations like Ricky and Joe and Katie have said. We've got to have the conversations, be willing to share. And what I was thinking this morning as I was preparing for this is that, you know, we almost have to get ourselves dirty in a good way. You know, we've got to talk to people that we ordinarily would not want to contact. But if we want to make a difference in our democratic society, we've got to be able to talk to everybody. And we can't assume by the way they look, by the way they think or talk or whatever, that they're not going to vote. It's all about educating, and that's up to us. And not just getting them registered to vote, but making sure that we remind them to vote. And I'm not real sure if Katie, Joe, and Ricky would have a comment on that one as far as our vote tripping process is concerned. Could you guys comment on that? The strategy that we use, or?
Yeah, so what we're doing at Move On is we have come up with a strategy called polling place vote tripling. And what that is we get volunteers to go to the polls, and anytime a voter comes out, you know, we approach them and we say, hey, would you remind 3 friends to vote for candidate so-and-so? And then they'll say, oh, sure. And then in the end, they'll receive a sticker. And then when they ask, why are you doing this? Why can't you do it? And then we'll simply say, well, they're more likely to vote if, you know, a friend or a family member tells them to vote. And by doing that, they're tripling the vote, we're turning out the vote, and in the end, we're going to ensure a victory for a progressive candidate.
And just to add a little bit more context to that, in 2021, that's exactly what we did in Georgia. We made so many phone calls into Georgia, we vote tripled up, it was amazing. But the thing about it is people want to be contacted. They want to be reminded. They want to know that you care about them voting. And I was asked so many times, where are you calling from? I said, I'm calling from Illinois. You're calling from Illinois? Thank you so much for caring. People want to be contacted. It's up to us. You know, we have a lot of excuses to why we don't do it. But what I think about, the political season is not a very long season. But it is one where you have to be very committed to doing something about it. I'm also calling for better work in Texas. And this is what I was told by the campaign. If you're going to make a commitment, keep it. Keep it. It's easy to back out because, well, you know, I just don't feel like doing it today. It's not even about that. If we want to make a difference and get the numbers up and get people involved, it's going to take us getting politically dirty. And that's not a negative. It's just been involved. Okay, so that was one. The other one is, I think Katie mentioned it earlier, is vote411.org. Great organization. And the other one is studentvote.org. Everything is there. And then maybe you guys are familiar with Michelle Obama's initiative, whenweallvote.org. That's also another good one. And then the one that's really, when you see these sites, you're going to see young people. The other one is Rock the Vote. So if you guys will share those sites with people that are in your networks and just say, you know what, this is what's available. It is easy. If you have questions, you know, every question is going to be answered there. It's a step-by-step process with each one of these. I've used them so many times. They're awesome. Okay, so thank you for doing that. And here, we're almost at closure. What I perceive today is that the majority of us on this call are going to have to reframe our thinking when it comes to, well, those young people don't vote. Those young people don't want to vote. Why don't they vote? There's a lot involved in the process of voting. Ricky very, very well clarified it. So did Katie, so did Joe. It's not about just getting a group of people together and say you need to vote. Where are they? How connected are we to our community? How connected are we to the young people in our community? It can't just be rhetoric. It's got to be beyond rhetoric. It's got to be action. Okay, so I have a question just for one person in the audience. One person. How will you begin brainstorming and strategizing about how to better engage and GOTV with young people in your neighborhood? One person who has not spoken today. You have the tools, you have the sites, there's more online. So Donna, is your hand up? Or would someone else like to take that question?
I'll take it. Ask me again, what is it you want to know, please?
Okay, so here we've had all this wonderful discussion today.
Yes, ma'am.
And we don't want to just leave empty-handed. The question is just, you can answer it, Donna, but it's for all of us. How
Okay.
will you begin brainstorming and strategizing about how to better engage and GOTV, get out the vote, with young people in your area, your neighborhood, get them registered? What are you going to do?
Yes, ma'am. What I'm going to do is definitely start having more swag for them. And also, when I speak to them, I want to try to start speaking directly to them and not their mothers or fathers, and asking their mother and fathers to remind them. So I want to start building a van list of young people and by name, so I can call them and ask for them by name and ask to speak with them and remind them how to vote. And also too, I don't think in the past, I've really focused on stopping young people. I have been on college campuses, but if you're just out generally, I think we have a tendency to let the young people walk past us. So I'm going to stop doing that. And I'm going to let a young person, I might not be able to tell if they're old enough, but I'm going to ask them, are you 18? Are you at least 18? So that I can speak to, are you going to be able to vote in six months before the election? So I'm going to change my mindset at how I view people, especially when we go out to neighborhoods and have rallies and voter registration drives.
That's a brilliant answer, Donna. Thank you so much. I want to know how it works out, because I know you are focused and it's going to happen. So thank you so much for that information. I want to share one last thing, and then we'll have closing points from our speakers. Yesterday, during that forum with Netroots Nation, Stephanie Gomez also said this, and I concur. The best way to reform our democracy is by investing in our young people. It has to be that. You guys have all said it. Joe, Katie, and Ricky, you've said it. And we must be listeners of what you've said today and just take it and use it. So I really do appreciate you guys' answers have absolutely been brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, and just for hanging out and sharing your wisdom. It goes, and I'm just like off the chart impressed. You guys were awesome. So let's start with Katie for closing remarks and anything that's on your heart to say to us about young people voting. And that one question was, hold on. Is the electoral voter registration process really set up for young voters to actively participate? Why or why not? You guys answered that question. I hope everyone was listening. So last words from Katie.
Yes. First, I want to say thank you so much for allowing us to do this, Ms. Evelyn. Really awesome. yeah, it's very important for our future that young voters feel like their voices are, heard, and that their votes do count, and that what they have to say and the way that they are voting is important, because the young people are the future, especially when it comes to politics as well. It's going to happen in the future, and they need to feel like they are important. And just giving them as much information as you can, I think, is one of the most important things, so that they actually know when to get out and register, when to get out and vote, and just telling them to remind as many people as well to vote, their friends, because they're young. So
Joe or Ricky?
Yeah, so again, thank y'all so much for coordinating this. I had such a great time with you all. I hope to do this again. Miss Evelyn, don't hesitate to invite us. So I can't wait to see what y'all do. Y'all are going to help us tremendously, and I hope y'all have such a good time. And like I said, follow me or add me. I have a lot of good ideas there, or feel free to reach out to us again with any concerns y'all have.
Awesome. Thank you, Ricky. And thank you again, Miss Evelyn, for hosting all of us. This was so fun, and such a fun communal get together on a Sunday at noon, right? So thank you so much for doing all of this, and it is really encouraging to hear the conversation at least being had, right? Because this is what a lot of places aren't even doing. They're not even trying to find out how to address the young vote. So it's good that we're trying to make our good first steps